This is Luke from Digital Trends, and today we're looking at one of the coolest and most interesting products I've ever gotten a chance to review. It's the Asus ZenBook Pro Duo. Now, you may have heard of this laptop before, known of course for its dual screen setup, but until you see it in person, it kind of still feels like a far off futuristic fantasy. But I can tell you, I've spent a lot of time with it, and despite a few flaws that it has, it really does live up to a lot of the potential that this crazy concept is going for. Now, I think that the ZenBook Pro Duo is bringing together two really cool trends that we're seeing in laptops right now. And the first is just bizarro experimentation, throwing things at the wall just to see what sticks, especially when it comes to, dual screens. And of all the models, different laptops I've seen and tried out that do something with two screens, the ZenBook Pro Duo really is my favorite. The second screen fills the entirety of that top half of the keyboard deck with its 4K resolution, matte finish display, and despite the weird aspect ratio, it's actually perfect for putting two windows or apps side by side. And I'm sure just hearing that and seeing that, your mind is already going crazy with what you could do with the possibilities. I mean, multitasking. And that's the really cool thing about this kind of experimental form factor is that, every person that sits down to use it is going to have a different idea of what they want to use it for, depending on who they are. It's not hard to imagine a photographer or a video editor wanting to drop their timeline or maybe their media library down there. It works great in both cases for clearing up some much needed space on your primary screen for what you're trying to focus on without hiding things completely. And in general, that's kind of my impression of what I wanted to do with this laptop most. Put stuff down there that I wanted access to, but not stuff that I wanted cluttering up my main screen. It's really too small and the angle of it is too flat to get any kind of detailed work done like typing or reading. My first impulse was to drop my Slack window down there, and that's not a good idea because I found myself hunched over all the time typing into this little tiny window. That's not the sort of thing you want to use the second screen for, and it will require that kind of experimentation to see what kind of things you might actually do with the screen. It's going to be different for everyone. But regardless of what you're doing on it, the lifted hinge does give you a slightly better angle on whatever you're seeing, and the matte finish helps with reflections because a lot of times you have lights shining straight down on that screen. There's more to it than just multitasking though. Asus has included a number of different modes to kind of get you thinking about different things you can do with it. For example, you can extend the bottom screen as part of the top screen, so you can kind of have a really long screen to scroll through web pages with. I didn't find that to be particularly helpful. It's kind of just a cool party trick. You can also have a handwriting app. I mean, that's nice because you're on a flat surface, stuff like that. But probably the most helpful thing that Asus has included here in terms of software is what it calls task groups. And essentially this lets you save a setup of windows and apps that you might use in a particular scenario, like maybe at work. And you can actually toggle through a few of them really easily. And I found this to be really helpful. And it gets around some of the weird things that Windows 10 does with split screen and multiple monitors. So it might sound a little gimmicky, and it's definitely not for everyone, but I actually really enjoyed having the second screen. And I actually think it affected my workflow for the better in my time with it. And how many times can you say that about a kind of experimental new laptop design? So the second big trend that the ZenBook Pro Duo is bringing to the fold is a focus on content creation in laptops. It's something that everyone's talking about right now, and we're finally getting an assortment of laptops that you can choose from that are actually good at this. Now, this is clearly what the ZenBook Pro Duo was made for because of two main reasons. It's got the 8-core Core i9 processor. This is an insanely powerful laptop processor. And it has the 4K OLED panel that's actually really color accurate. Now let's get back to that Core i9, because at this point I've tested a number of laptops that use that same powerful chip, the MacBook Pro, the Dell XPS 15, and now this thing. And strangely enough, this experimental concept laptop is the most powerful of the three, especially when it comes to multi-core tasks like video editing and rendering. The comparison with the XPS 15 is particularly interesting. I mean, it has that same processor, same 32 gigabytes of RAM. The only difference is that the ZenBook Pro Duo has a better graphics card in the RTX 2060. So all of this adds up to a 36% increase in Premiere Pro versus the XPS 15, which was already a super fast laptop. In fact, it was the fastest one I'd ever tested. In real terms, that looks like shaving off a minute and a half off of our 2-minute 4K ProRes 422 export. That's seriously impressive. I mean, if you look at what a laptop could do just a year ago, it's not even close. Now, I chalk up this lead that the ZenBook Pro Duo has over the other laptops to two things. The better graphics card, I already mentioned that, but also the better cooling. So obviously this has a much thicker chassis than the XPS 15, but also has better ventilation. You have vents along the side, and you have that ergo lift hinge that kind of props it up off the table. Doesn't make for the sleekest laptop in the world, but in terms of performance, it really pays off. Unfortunately, the way Asus has tuned this particular 4K OLED panel, which is the same one that a lot of these laptops are using, is for accuracy. It's really bright, fills the Adobe and sRGB color spaces at 100%, and like I said, super color accurate. And while we're talking about performance, even though the ZenBook Pro Duo is definitely not a gaming laptop, you shouldn't buy it because it can game. It actually can. The RTX 2060 is a really powerful GPU, and even though you don't have any of the gaming features like a high refresh rate or G-Sync or anything like that, I didn't have any problem booting up Battlefield 5 and getting over 60 frames per second, as long as I brought the resolution down to 1080p, and that's with ultra settings. You know, that's pretty impressive, and again, it goes back to that cooling that Asus has done on the ZenBook Pro Duo. Now, there are a few pretty significant compromises that you need to know about if you're thinking about picking this up. And the first is ports. Port selection isn't horrible, but you get USB-A, Thunderbolt 3, HDMI, kind of all the basic stuff. But it is missing an SD card slot, and I just don't understand why Asus made a laptop for content creators and didn't put an SD card slot on it. I don't know. The other thing is the look and feel of this thing. I don't necessarily mind the bulkiness. I mean, it does weigh 5.5 pounds. It's pretty heavy and pretty thick, but again, that's what goes towards that performance. I more have a problem with just kind of the general feel of it. I mean, when you open up the laptop like this, and you can see the second screen, it looks really futuristic. And then when you look at it from the back, from the lid, it looks like you're using an $800 ZenBook. And on something this experimental, this special, I would have really liked to see Asus had put some more time into designing a lid that looks a little more interesting to fit the laptop. I mean, it's well built, it's sturdy, but it's just not the most interesting or premium looking. And then there's the touchpad and the entire setup of the inputs, because obviously they have to be moved down to the bottom of the keyboard deck, and the touchpad is way over here now. Now, the keyboard itself I actually really like. It's a great typing experience, it's really quiet, and there's enough travel there, 1.4 millimeters, and that it doesn't feel mushy or anything like that. There's even some nice backlighting happening here with multiple stages of brightness. It's a really nice touch. The touchpad, on the other hand, is obviously way off to the side, and with all designs like this, I feel like that's kind of just an afterthought. Won't be working for lefties, that's for sure, so you'll definitely need a mouse regardless of who you are. So yeah, it's not a super portable laptop, and even in terms of battery life, I mean, you're not gonna get much here, which I kind of expected with a 4K 15-inch laptop. Not horrible though, somewhere between 4 or 5 hours. If you turn off the screen, maybe 6, but you know, you're not gonna go all day with this thing, and that's to be expected. But as a desktop replacement, as a workstation type PC, I think this is one of the most innovative computers I've really ever used, especially if you're the type of person that can put this amount of power to use. Because remember, this isn't just a $3,000, you know, gimmicky, fun concept, right? This is a seriously powerful laptop that can blow through video renders like nobody's business. So if you're that type of person, you know, by all means, this is a full recommendation from us. But if nothing else, man, this is exciting for the future of PCs.